you all so much for joining us. I'm glad to see such a terrific turnout that can only be justified by our excellent speaker. I'm going to just say a few opening remarks and we'll hand it over to him. So first, before I begin, I just want to thank the sponsors of Mass Save for making this event series possible for another year. Mass Save, as you all know, is a coalition of the state's utilities that's dedicated to enhancing energy efficiency and affordability. And there are generous, robust incentives that support passive house construction. There are single-family incentives that start at $25,000 for a single-family house. And there are also multifamily incentives, which start at $3,750 per unit before numerous adders. So I encourage you, if you are starting a passive house project in the state, if it's a multifamily project, you should contact multifhr@icf.com. If you have questions about training reimbursements, which they also support, you can contact Passive House Training MA@icf.com. Passive House Massachusetts is also here to help you navigate the state's programs and get you training. So you can talk to me or Beth or go to phmass.org. I also just want to remind people about CEUs. If you're here today and you want CEUs, make sure that you sign in on our sign-in sheet over at the table. And if you're online, make sure your name is in your little picture window so that we can capture that, so that we can validate your CEU requests. And to request your CEUs, you can go to phmass.org/CEU. We've got a few upcoming events on January 22nd in partnership with A Better City and DOER. We've got an event on the codes, the stretch and specialized codes. And then on February 10th, our next monthly meeting will be with Passive House Massachusetts Board President, James Peterson, back there, talking about how electrification of domestic hot water is a tough nut to crack. But first, before we get to that, we've got tonight's presentation from Brad Mahoney. Brad is the Director of Sustainable Development at Millennium Partners. He oversaw the sustainability and technological aspects for the development of Winthrop Center, which I don't think needs much of an introduction from me, because you're about to give it. Before that, he oversaw the redevelopment of the Filene's building near Downtown Crossing, so he's very much used to putting his mark on the Boston skyline. We're so thrilled to have him as a speaker, and we're really thrilled also that he has joined Passive House Massachusetts as a board member. And so we're so excited to have him come to talk to us about the world's largest passive house office building. Give a big round of applause to Brad Mahoney.
Thank you so much, Alexander, and welcome to everyone here in the room, online. It's been a wonderful community, and I think the success of this project is due in part to a lot of people that are here in this very room that have been supportive, have worked on the project, those that are on Zoom, and I would like to acknowledge all of you. So anyone in this room who has worked at Winthrop, on Winthrop at any point, Alexander and I were talking earlier about 2016, 10 years ago. That's when this journey started, because that is when the City of Boston awarded Millennium Partners the Winthrop Square site. So 10 years later, here we are. So if I would like anyone who has worked on the project to please stand up. Don't be shy. And thank you very much. So tonight, this will be a little interactive. I want to start the presentation by giving a quick video. In this video, the framework for this video is how we talk to tenants, how we engage tenants. And you'll understand that a little bit better. Alexander explained, I started with Millennium almost 14 years ago, and my first project was the Filene's redevelopment. I was not on the development side prior to that, but I was definitely a builder. I started my career in the construction management world, a degree in engineering, and started working on Millennium projects 25 years ago, back in 2001, which is around the time that Millennium started its journey here in Boston. So it's been really fun. I'm committed to Boston. I've been living in Boston for 25 years. I'm deeply involved in Boston in many, many aspects. If I weren't doing this, one thing that I would be doing, which I do all the time, is I've coached hundreds of young men, young women in youth sports, baseball, girls soccer, boys soccer, indoor futsal, and I'm really passionate about it, and I think there's some carryover between the passive house journey and the learning and the coaching and the teaching between what I do professionally and what I do in my free time. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the video and then we'll dive into the presentation.
Winthrop Center, the largest passive house office building in the world, the most sustainable office building in the United States. A building so ambitious, new innovations had to be invented in order to achieve its expansive vision. More than just a beautiful building, Winthrop Center ushers in a new model of sustainability, innovation, and wellness that will forever change the way large buildings are designed in the 21st century. Climate change and the global pandemic have made this absolutely imperative. But long before 2020, Millennium Partners was already at work, imagining a new kind of building that would show the world that it was possible to exceed LEED Platinum, to use green energy, and be carbon neutral. We believed the most impactful place to start was to use less energy in the first place. That was our North Star moving forward. As innovation leaders, we knew it wasn't just the right thing to do. We saw an opportunity to partner with our tenants to help them achieve their own ambitious climate goals in ways that other landlords couldn't. We could provide a literal blueprint for net zero office operations. The Millennium Partners team went to work. We challenged each other and our partners, including professors at MIT in the global manufacturing sector, to think beyond and deliver a new kind of solution that would be groundbreaking today, yet still innovative 10 years from now. What rose to the top was the Passive House Standard, a rigorous standard established more than 25 years ago by the Passive House Institute in Darmstadt, Germany, for use in residential homes. The catch? It had not been applied to large office buildings, especially an 800,000 square foot building like Winthrop Center. After initial skepticism and many meetings, our partners at the Passive House Institute fully and enthusiastically committed to helping us implement the Passive House Standard to achieve the uncompromising performance and dramatic energy savings we were after, to help us become the largest passive house office building on Earth. 2 years into the planning and modeling process, we had our path forward. First, we need to invent a new kind of curtain wall, one that had never been made. We challenged the industry to deliver an unheard of level of insulation and air tightness. The northern Boston climate would make this very difficult. We'd have to eliminate thermal bridging and reimagine the windows using triple glazing. In the end, we created an entirely new curtain wall that could be used by us as well as sustainable buildings of the future to set a new standard of air tightness. Next, we looked at how Passive House could improve workplace thermal comfort and wellness. Human body heat plays a role in the heating and cooling of the building, as do the individual neighborhoods inherent in our T-shaped design, which can be powered up or down. We determined that no workstation should be more than 35 feet from a window, and all fresh air outside terraces should be accessible from every floor. For the physical and mental health of Winthrop's inhabitants, we wouldn't compromise. Winthrop Center's one-of-a-kind passive house ventilation system provides unmatched thermal comfort and energy savings. Unlike typical buildings, this system provides a continuous supply of fresh air, which enhances creativity and productivity, creates a healthier environment, and integrates holistically into the occupants' daily lives.
It's one thing to write articles about it, and it's one thing to teach about it. It's one thing for government to put standards in place, but when people actually start to do this stuff in practice, and we see the model, and we know that it can work, that's what really makes the difference. You've just shown the whole world that we can do this.
A plan, years in the making, from the only company bold and inventive enough to do it. Winthrop Center has made believers out of everyone, especially city and state leaders eager to forge a new path to a more sustainable future.
But particularly with this building and the history of what it meant to add to the downtown skyline, to work your way through many, many years of process, and to be way ahead of the curve in sustainability and ensuring that you've created a monument, an example to the very standards that have since caught up to where this building is.
A shimmering new sliver of the future on the Boston skyline. A monumental new starting point for the next generation of urban builders and conservation-minded companies. The most sustainable cold weather office building in the U.S. and the largest passive house office building in the world. Winthrop Center challenges all of us to imagine what's possible, envision what's coming, and then think beyond.
All right, someone just said, let's go. Okay, so. So just to give everyone a quick framework, so when Mayor Wu was speaking, that was in the fall of 2023. I mentioned 2016. We'll go through the whole timeline, but basically the building opened in 2023. So here we are, January 26. Tough to believe. So Millennium Partners, I mentioned, we started in the late 90s here in Boston. And we have kind of marched from one project to the next. Started out over on Avery Street, North and South Block. Marched down the street, Hayward Place, Millennium Place, which I actually worked on when I was with in my prior career at Lend-Lease, and the 2008 crash hit that one up. And that's actually, when that started in 2011, 2012, that's when I was hired to work on Filene's, because Millennium Place was starting. They had Filene's, they had Millennium Tower, and I was employee number 4 in Millennium's Boston office. So it was, which kind of gives you a window into how we run. We run pretty lean. We do a lot. So I'm Director of Sustainable Development, but I'm also the construction expert. I'm also in charge of office leasing, kind of on the construction side. So we do a lot, which is good and bad. It's fun. So the Winthrop Center team, I am sure that I left some companies out of here, but I think one thing I want to say is that this was a monumental effort, this project, and it really was in large part because everyone came together. Handel, WSP, D. Simone, Stephen Winters, Vidaris. The video mentioned MIT. Professor John Fernandez came to us at some point, and we'll talk about that. Niche Engineering, and of course, last but not least, all the men and women who made this project possible, and all the men and women who continue to make this possible. Construction continues because this project, as you'll see in a minute, is commercial office, so we are still building out that office. So the program. So this is a 1.8 million square foot building, 830,000 square feet of passive house office, which is in the middle of the building, and the top 600,000 square feet is residential, 317 homes. And both the residential and the office have amenities, 25,000 square foot club areas that are within the respective residential and office areas. And then the ground floor, the connector. And one of the reasons why it's called the connector is because it is a wonderful public space that connects downtown crossing with the financial district. And down in the lower floors, we have some parking. This is a cutout, this is a view of the connector from the Federal Street side. And it kind of gives you a vantage point. I don't know, how many people in the room here have been in Winthrop Center? Okay. Well, you know, I was talking to Beth, Alexander, and some of the other board members. You know, one thing we will be doing, so I'm sure at some point this presentation, the font that I have up here is going to be too small and you're not going to be able to read it. So we will be having a tour or two in the next couple months. So if you've been on the tour previously and the building was a little bit under construction, you're welcome to come back, and we hope that everyone will join us. Another view of the connector with a restaurant on the mezzanine level underneath the Chihuly. Okay, so a little bit of story time, which I think is part of my #1 lesson at Millennium, working on Winthrop Center, delivering Passive House. 2016, we were awarded the project, but it started before then, because it started with some charrettes. Millennium Partners, historically, we have run as a family. Handel Architects has designed every one of Chris Jeffrey's buildings. D. Simone, the same builders. So what that means is Chris, Phil, Rich, Mario, Kathy, Joe, all the partners put their heads together and said, okay, Winthrop Center is a design competition. It's a development competition. We're competing with other developers for this site. How can we make this the best possible and win the award? Well, so Handel was in the middle of working with Stephen Winters down in New York City, Cornell Tech, the house. So it was their inspiration to us to incorporate Passive House. Now, what exactly did that mean? Well, we didn't really fully understand, appreciate, know 100% at the time. But it was part of the proposal. We were going to move forward with Passive House. Where was it going to be? The whole building? Well, as Alexander explained, largest Passive House office building. We ended up implementing it in the office, but not in the residential. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So, taking the inspiration behind that, we put it into our proposal. Our proposal also flipped the script a little bit because the city asked for an observatory at the top of the building, but the connector, which you saw, was also part of our proposal. A little different than some of the others. So, okay, the city awarded us the project. Now it's time to go. Well, we're going to go, but therein lies the challenge. Millennium Partners, you know, we've developed many really, really beautiful buildings, wonderful developments. This one coming on the heels of Millennium Tower, right down the street. But we are not rooted in Passive House development. We are not rooted in high performance development. So there was a little bit of learning and exploratory around the world. So kind of understanding the edge in Amsterdam, which at the time, you know, Bloomberg had done an article about it, talking about why this building was so successful. A team went over to visit that building, met with tenants, met with owners, met with the operators. And what they discovered was that it was the search for talent that drove people to that building. So, okay, a little bit of discovery there, and that's important. And we did a tremendous amount of research, not just on the edge, but around the world. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was peppered by our team, like, what are the beacon projects out there and what are they doing? Because for me, Winthrop Center was a dream. When an owner of a building owner of a development company, says, I am gonna make this my single marquee project, what would you put into it? What would you do? That's literally what happened. So it was quite inspiring. So it brought me to Germany in 2018, fall of 2018. Went to go visit the Passive House Institute. Because at the time, the idea that you would move forward with Passive House in a portion of the building, just the office, and not the residential, and not the entire building, it was not standard, right? And it wasn't a slam dunk that that was going to happen. But there are reasons for it. You know, if you think back to 2016, 2017, you know, how many large Passive House projects were there at the time, right? The house was the largest that was under development at the time, and that was 250, 260,000 square feet. And look, you know, we're real estate developers, and we're not just going to go from 250,000 square feet to 1.8 million square feet Passive House. We just aren't. And one of the reasons why we were positioning forward on the office side is if you look at the building and you look at the image on the right there, we're a mid-block site. We need to compete. We are not a corner site. Views are not necessarily, you know, what this project is about, but the views are excellent. And so you need everything you can to compete. And so I think there's a little bit of pragmatism in all of this. You know, striving to create something next generation, but being practical about it. And that's kind of where we found ourselves. So the trip to Germany for me in that fall of 2018 was eye-opening. You know, meeting with the founders of the Passive House Institute, meeting with the staff, explaining what we were doing and what we were about. It kind of helped lay a groundwork for the creation of the pilot project, which is the Passive House office at Winthrop Center. So, you know, new global standard. If you go on our website, we talk about the world's first 5-star office building. I mean, it's, you know, it's good marketing. It sells, and we'll talk a little bit about how it has translated to the users themselves. Because let's remember, what are buildings if not for people, right? And so 800,000 square feet, we saw that we were going to have 3,000 to 4,000 people coming through that office space every day. And so to be able to positively impact those people and convince those tenants that they should come to Winthrop Center, that was our single greatest challenge to start. In addition to all the technical challenges, the building, the teaching, right? You know, the questions that you get asked, where's the Passive House specification? Well, it's a performance standard, right? So sure, the specifications have some Passive House elements, but it's embedded and integrated into everything that you do. And so before I get into that, I just want to tell one story. Well, we have many stories, but 2018, we have a potential tenant who's going to take down 600,000 square feet. If you think about where we were in 2018, Passive House, sustainable design, high performance, there wasn't much credit for that kind of within the world of commercial real estate. And I think the way that commercial office landlord-tenant relationship, brokers on the landlord side, brokers on the tenant side, and there's a little bit of back and forth. So we got deep into conversations with this large tenant, and sitting and reviewing all the various systems, security, technology, mechanical, electrical, etc. We get to sustainability, we talk about Passive House, and the lead says to me, well, why would I want to be the first? And we were far along. I mean, we were like deep into this, and it would have substantially like taken quite a bit of the office space. Why would I be the first? And it was at that moment that I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a challenge. Why would I want to be the first? So that tenant did not come to Winthrop Center. So it was a lesson. Look, it was a chance to kind of look inward and think about our story, a chance to look inward and think about, well, yeah, we think this is the greatest and we think, you know, this is the best development, but maybe it's not for everyone. You know, the irony is I contrasted this with when I came back from Germany, I flipped one of the, PHI gave me a bunch of pamphlets and they gave me some reading, and I thought that was hilarious that, you know, the founders were handing me little pamphlets and handing me, you know, these brochures to read, and I handed it to my 10-year-old. Adrian was really interested in it, and he started reading it, and he said, and I hadn't really biased him to anything about, I told him generally what it was about. He was reading it and he said, I think the brochure was active for passive. He was reading it and said, this sounds like, I get it, pretty good science. And so I was comparing like the two responses, and I thought to myself, wow, this is interesting. So this is going to be a challenge. So this is 2018, moving forward. All the while, we have all the technical challenges ahead of us. So we're running two projects. We're running the technical side while we're running the leasing side, and they are running concurrent. And I'm involved in both of them, so I can speak to both of them. So I mentioned, you know, pilot project, treated area, 622,000 square feet. If you notice, primary energy demand, if you're familiar with the PHI standards, we're north of the 38, we're at the 42 at this point. Part of the reason why, you know, we're having discussions with PHI. You know, some things that were obviously different, we're all 98.6 degree ovens, so the cooling load within, you know, a floor plate we have 150 to 250 people is quite high. On the flip side, as you know, that heating load contributes in a positive way to one thing that we learned, which is that you really don't need much heating in a passive house building. And one reason we went forward with PHI and not FIAS, because at the time we studied both. Stephen Winters, I will tell you, I learned more through my conversation with Stephen Winters, Lois, Dylan, Michael Donnell, Stephen, you know, than at any point in my career. And I think it was through those conversations, there were some challenges, right? And Steve Makovitz, who's here in the room, was at the center of it all. When I say the center of it all, I mean the center of everything, right? Kind of piecing everything together. And it was through those conversations that I really appreciated the idea of integrated design. Kind of integrating the mechanical, the electrical, the systems, the potential value engineering that the construction managers are going to offer, and the impact that it has on the throttle, on the energy throttle. So this was both units. Okay, so talking earlier, mid-block site, north 75-101, south of us 100 Summer Street. So the site is constrained, you know, which creates some logistical challenges for building. And so the solution through, you know, a one-year process of design assist with Suffolk, Sodawall, Caras and Caras, Socotec Vidaris, you know, Handel was a unitized curtain wall system out of Canada. And where we landed through all of that, Spandrel R18, the vision glass U value of 0.22. And completely hung from the inside, they created a, I don't think I have any pictures of it in here. They created a, basically a trolley system that allowed the windows and the window system to be picked from the inside, because crane usage was too valuable to creating the superstructure. So from a developer's standpoint, getting to the endpoint and delivering schedule is first and foremost much more important and more valuable. So if you can come up with an alternate way of installing the facade, you would do it. So this kind of shows you some of the key points: the thermally broken curtain wall, triple glazing, double OE coating on the glazed the vision unit, 10-inch deep system. The triple glazing was 3/8, quarter, 2 layers of Louis coating, argon filled. You'll see in some of the photos the mineral wool at the head and at the sill. It's funny. So this project, kind of from a technical standpoint, we ran it really with 3 distinct teams. We had a residential team, and they were fighting for the residential layout. We had an office team who was fighting for the office layout. Okay, 5-foot modules, distance from the core to the facade, and all of those things were in tension because, Chris Jeffries, the founder of Millennium Partners, when he personally is laying out residential units, which he was on this project because this is a $1.35 billion project, and if he said, I want to make some changes in a residential unit, well, Chris gets to do that. And the rest of us have to figure out a way. So all of those things were in tension. And, I mentioned Steve kind of being at the middle of it, and then Scott eventually joining the team and helping us kind of navigate those waters. The office side, this idea of passive house and vision glass, that was the topic quite a bit. Vision glass. How much vision? And we would throw around numbers, right? Because you model numbers, like 45, 50%. And I can laugh about it now, but at the time, there was a lot of like hemming and hawing about, we're only at 45%. Well, who really knows what the vision percentage is on some of the other projects? But, so, the mid-block site allowed for opportunities to maximize views. And we'll get to that in a second. But, so, one thing I didn't mention, so this fabricator's up in Canada, and it just reminds me that we tested this curtain wall, and then March of 2020 happened. Well, we're in the middle of building our superstructure. We're in the middle of testing and fabricating some of our curtain wall north of the border. Well, we know what happened in March of 2020. Border shut down, pandemic hit, and guess what? We lost our construction financing. $765 million. April 6th, 2020, it was supposed to close. Hey, it's life in the big city. And so we kind of went back at it in search of financing, and many months later in the fall, closed. The project changed. The cost of money was different. So I think when I talk about pragmatism, these are like some of the practical things that on the development side that are risks, and we're aware of them. I don't think any of us foresaw a pandemic. But, so it created, that pandemic created many challenges. But once that financing was in place, we were in it, and we were all about, overcoming those challenges collectively. So this is a picture of their facility. This gives you a little bit, I don't know, can you see that on the screen? Yeah, okay. Solar heat gain coefficients, U values. That's at balcony. We have a terrace on every office floor. It's a conscious decision that we made because it's overlooking Winthrop Square Park to kind of connect people with nature. And at the head and sill around the entire perimeter, 1,000 feet of perimeter on this project, We have a 4-inch thick mineral wool, to help us meet our energy targets. Which for us, we were concerned that that would be an issue for tenants, but it actually, in hindsight, hasn't been at all. You just rock over it, it becomes part of the program. This gives, oh, here we go, we do have a picture of the trolley on the left there, and then them hanging the big panel there on the right. We were on like a 2-week cycle, so every 2 weeks we turn over a floor, move up to the next floor. We have about maybe anywhere between 20 to 40 panels being hung every day. Some pictures of the backside. This is the flyby. This is Federal Street view. So now we get to the testing, which the boundary for the Passive House office, the 800,000 square feet, is within the confines of the office itself. So the lowest office floor is the floor, and the upmost office floor / mechanical is basically the ceiling, and the facade being the side. So then we had challenges that we had to review with PHI, which are, we need to build the building. We have a tower crane smack dab in the middle of our concrete. We have man and material hoists. We have 2 tower cranes, actually, 2 man and material hoists. And so how do you test? How do you seal around those? How often are you testing? So we develop protocols for all of that. And where is your airtight layer, and how do you do that? So this kind of details a little bit of, some of the details around that. The areas in blue are the 4 locations where we had fresh air running vertically and then out to the office tenants, which is atypical. Typical office buildings, you have 1 or 2 locations and then have a ring duct, but we decided that to kind of accommodate the tenant workforce, we would do it in 4 zones, and we did that kind of across the board, all MEP services. So the blower door testing, the picture on the right there, I included that because we were testing, it's kind of funny thinking about this. Like, we've been building these buildings for how many years? And only through this are we actually testing the building. It's just something that hasn't been part of, many of you've been doing it many years, but these large buildings, we haven't. And so this was our first experience doing it. And the image on the right is we were having trouble on one of the floors finding why we weren't meeting our air leakage requirements. And it was right there in that location. Basically, the head there, on the other side is the terrace, okay? And so you all know this, but quality control, it's key. I mean, we've always been very good about when we have a clerk, the clerk of the works on our projects has always been someone that's basically an extra arm for Millennium Partners, an extra eye and ears. And actually, we ended up hiring that clerk, and she's now one of the chief engineers on the project. She's excellent. Okay, so this was something that, the city asked that the project be LEED Platinum. That was one of the criteria. They asked for an observatory, they asked for an iconic 600-foot tall building, and so we gave them LEED Platinum, we gave them Passive House, we gave them WELL certification. And one of the challenges was, with moving forward with all these different certifications, is understanding where the differences are, understanding where the synergies are. And it was kind of through that discovery process that we learned that, Passive House as a comfort standard, that's kind of why it was created, less driven by climate ideology. And so the synergies in terms of how we talked about that to our tenants was super important. And so this slide was created kind of for our tenants. You know, and I think one of the lessons learned that I would say in terms of storytelling is when we first started this project, when we would meet with the tenant, we might talk about Passive House. Well, it begs the question, what is Passive House? And you start talking about Passive House for another minute, minute and a half, and as opposed to leading with, hey, would you like to work in the most high-performing building that's healthy, tech forward, and is the development of the future? And oh, by the way, it's Passive House, LEED Platinum, well certified. Sounds simple, but it took a little while, a little learning. Because when the pandemic hit, we had already committed to moving forward with well certification. We had high efficiency MERV filtration. We had touchless all across the entire project. So, you know, commercial real estate, I don't think has changed as much as it did since the pandemic. It hadn't changed in many, many years. And the pandemic started it ushered in a change, right? Remember those early days, fomite protection. No one wanted to touch elevator buttons, right? We were washing our vegetables, and all of a sudden, you know, on the tenant side, I would be getting questions about, how much fresh air? What's your filtration? Things that we'd already thought about, but that we weren't marketing because they weren't, you know, front of mind. So, the mechanical system. We took one floor in the middle of the building and basically made that the entire mechanical and electrical floor that serves up and down. So I know what the video said, but this building does have gas. We have gas boilers for the limited heating within the Passive House confines. And on the tenant side, fan coil units. Okay, so tenants are installing horizontal fan coil units. We have magnetic scroll high efficiency electric chillers that feed both the residential and the commercial office and the space below it. The office club as well as the connector. I mentioned the distribution zones within the fresh air. This was new to us, but it makes perfect sense to me. You know, AeroSeal, we did AeroSeal on all the vertical, both the fresh air as well as the extract. And, you know, I don't know why you wouldn't do it, kind of having gone through it. And, you know, it's just part of the overall process, helps with the energy. There is a little bit of schedule that you have to take into account. And then fall of 2023, when we finally received the certification, that's, you know, those videos where Mayor Wu was talking, that was from the Passive House certification celebration. Thank you, Hank, for handing Chris the certificate there. It was, you know, I remember distinctly when, so here's the story. So we decided that we were going to have a celebration to celebrate the Passive House certification. And I said, okay, when are we doing this? That's like 3 weeks. Guys, we don't have the certification yet. Nothing like a party to force, you know, force something. And that was true. I was on the orange line coming into the city when I received an email from PHI with a certificate. And it was, I was shocked at the flood of emotion that overcame me because it had been many years. We had been through the pandemic. We had been through some challenges over the shadow law, which I'm not going to get into. And technically, you know, from a technical standpoint, this project is many different projects within one. Okay, so what does a Passive House project like this cost? So when I first started this exploratory, I was at a Mass Building Congress event, and one of the construction managers who was working on a Passive House project told the room, a couple hundred people, yeah, Pass House project costs about 6 to 10% more. And I thought, oh boy, we're in trouble. We're not going to be taking off if we're at 6 to 10%. Fortunately, you know, my background within construction management allowed me to kind of see like, hey, well, let's break it down into its parts and pieces. And what we found that, you know, if you look at the envelope, if you look at the specific pieces, specific parts, you know, 2 to 3%. So $15 million, call it. You know, the office portion, $400 million, $400 million. And, you know, you all in this room know that, you know, it's the envelope, it's the design assist, the additional insulation, the testing, the certification, the modeling. But that was an easy one to say yes to, given the potential benefits, because we firmly believed in this. So much so that the president of the company, this is back in early 2018 through 2019, the president and I worked on a digital library for Millennium Partners. And it was all the research that underpinned everything that we were going to put into this project. It was 4 binders. Phil would read these on the plane, he would read them on his commute in New York City, and he and I would kind of share thoughts about it. He brought everyone into a room, he dropped the binders on the table, and he said, this is our new religion. This is how we move forward. So that right there is leadership. And that empowered me to do everything that I needed to do to try to, like, you know, help the team understand what we're trying to do. And, you know, internally, I can't emphasize like how important that was. It really was. Because everyone saw that, like, hey, we're fully committed to this. And we haven't looked back. You know, it's been wonderful. So, you know, the video talks about kind of developing so that when you're delivering the building, you're kind of ahead of the curve. Well, along the way, questions are being asked about building performance standard, BERDO, etc. Okay, we're there. We got it, right? Decarbonizing. Okay, passive house, limited natural gas for heating. That's easy to do, okay? And there are lessons to be learned, I would say, within the existing building construct from all of this, and we take that. You know, benefits, many of you know this, but I think it's evident, and I'll kind of share our tenant base in a second, but the benefits are longer than this list, right? The marketability to tenants, right? You know, when we started, it was all about, oh, lower utility costs. Well, it's much more than that, right? This is about retention and attraction of talent. Bringing people to a place where they feel like they're positively contributing, right? And that's, when you have 830,000 square feet that you're leasing, that's super important, okay? Higher long-term asset value. I mean, that's fundamental, right? You don't want to create something that's going to be out of date by the time it comes online. Maintenance cost, resilience. You know, the engineers who work at Winthrop Center also worked at 2 Avery Street and other projects, and by far and away, they say that, like, tenant satisfaction is second to none at Winthrop Center. And it's because of all of the efforts of the team, construction, commissioning. So, you know, who are our tenants? Well, so Cambridge Associates was our first. They signed in 2021. And then we followed with many others who, you know, are really, really happy. Deloitte, McKinsey, IR&M, ECG, M&T Bank, Arthur Gallagher, and we have a slate of others who Pathstones. So in 2025, we have like 5 or 6 10,000 square foot tenants who, basically rounding out, we're at like 90% leased at this point. So we have 2 floors left. which I think is quite remarkable. We had 2024 wasn't the best. I don't think we signed a lease during 2024, but 2025 we picked up the pace. And you know, at the end of the day, it's all rooted in Passive House, in the sustainability, in the story. And I'll leave you with two things. So the Green Site Selection Questionnaire, 2021, that was the first time, and I had seen RFPs, I had seen 50, 55 RFPs at that point. That was the first time I'd ever seen a green questionnaire from a tenant. And at that point, I said, contrasting it with 2018, why would I want to be the first? I said, okay, now we're talking, we're humming. And that was McKinsey. So credit to them, right? For saying, hey, Passive House wasn't listed on the Green Site Selection Questionnaire. That's okay, we added it. But it was a sign that things were changing. And it was with McKinsey that this idea of storytelling, it was with McKinsey that the president of the company called me up. He said, Brad, tell me a story. Phil, what do you mean? Tell me a story, how did we get here? And the story is a lot of embedded in that video. It's like, well, what did you do with that curtain wall? Had it ever been done before, triple glazed? Had you how did you create the energy model, syncing Stephen Winters with WSP? How did all of the women and men kind of working on the design side, implementation through the construction side? And so we went to McKinsey and had a honest discussion about it. Let's tell you a story. It's a story of innovation, a story of leadership, and we want you to be part of it. And it was kind of through that back and forth that we learned that, you know, sometimes telling your story in an honest way, tenants can appreciate that in a way that they can then tell their employees and make their employees feel good about working at a place like Winthrop Center. This was an earlier, you know, slide that we had created kind of for tenants to help them understand everything that Winthrop offered. We could spend a couple hours talking about Winthrop Center. It's, you know, we had a quite diverse array of efforts on this project. So thank you all very much. I just thank you all for your support through the years, because I feel like, you know, a lot of this, there's been a lot of cheerleaders, and, you know, I think that's important. You know, development here in Boston is kind of slow, to say the least, but I think we all cheer each other on, and I think times like these we need that. So thank you all, and Alexander, if we have questions, we can certainly take them.
All right, let's start with one from the room. Mr. Keaton.
Thank you. Brad, I'm really interested in understanding how you went through the tenant fit-out and passed on the Passive House requirements to tenants who are used to bringing in their own team for tenant fit-out. You didn't speak to that at all, and it couldn't have been easy.
Yeah, so aside from making sure that they're not drilling into the mullions, which did happen once, and it happened recently, I'm embarrassed to say. Just kidding. So tenants wanted to understand what we were doing. You know, they wanted to know, like, you know, sometimes when you get to the teams that are responsible for the fitting out of the project, they want to know what Passive House is. So we had a couple instances where IR&M, for example, brought me in, and I gave their staff, their team, a training about it. McKinsey, we talked about it kind of early on during the fit out. What does Passive House mean, and what are the practical implications? Part of our certification with PHI has a few notes about, like, okay, some of the standards now, but lighting and power density. Okay, what are we trying to, what are some of our goals, right? Perimeter heating, do you need perimeter heating? Is it by air? We don't have any, perimeter fin tube. So it was kind of bringing them in and understanding, having them understand what we were trying to do and why we were trying to do it. We're all in this together. Like if tenant A is using more than tenant B and not really being mindful of it, then it's defeating the purpose.
I'm just curious about the office residential separation and decision, particularly from the perspective of, I believe the residences are for sale. So was that from a cost perspective part of the reason, the difference between leasing the space versus the for sale space, that one would be passive house and the other would not?
Yeah, I think it was a decision that at the time we weren't exactly sure what we were doing on the kitchens relative to gas versus electric. Tim, we're making these decisions 2017, 2018, and one thing we always do is go into early procurement because we understand the critical path, right? And we know the risks of delaying procurement. We see it today, tariffs, et cetera, right? So that uncertainty combined with wanting to market the office piece and where we had been, the house hadn't come online yet, right? We're at 250,000 square feet. So jumping up to like 1.5 million square feet of passive house felt like a lot to us.
You mentioned that there was conversations about vision area. As the project was completed and you've got all these happy tenants now, has there been any feedback, positive or otherwise, about the vision area? And is there anything that you might have done differently, or how's that kind of shaken out?
Great question. So let me try to let me go back to our floor plan. Okay, so here, let's see. Only internally do we talk about vision area. That's what I would say. I have not heard a tenant complain. Tenants are, they come into the space and they are like thrilled. They're really, really happy. And what we did is we maximized our views, the front face along Devonshire, and then along Federal Street. These spaces here, you have buildings, they get wonderful light. Our floor to floor, floor to underside is 12 feet. So even with an 8-foot by 5-foot piece of glass, it allows a lot of natural light.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to take some questions from the internet now.
Was the project given lower exterior wall R values than what we see with our standard passive house multifamily buildings?
So it was not given any, it was just like all passive house buildings were designed to a performance standard, right? And we were trying to reduce our energy as much as possible. At the time that we designed this, our facade was 2 times better than code, which is not insignificant. And so the R18, I think if you were to design a residential, it would be different.
And then, were there issues with solar gain with so much glazing and limited shading?
No, we have blinds everywhere. So we didn't, tenants typically come in and we give them an allowance, they put in blinds. But we treated the glass as well for that, to account for, when we wanted the gains to work to our advantage and when we didn't want them to.
Great. And then was the air testing done floor by floor? Was there any test done of the entire passive house zone? And what limits were used?
So the testing was done floor by floor. We couldn't do the entire boundary, all 20 floors, because at one point we had Cambridge Associates in building. And Cambridge Associates came in and they knocked out the slab to interconnect 2 floors.
We have other questions in the room here. Yeah.
Is there a future in which the building will switch from using gas to just completely all electric? Is that in the works?
I'm sure there is a future. It's not today. But
was there like consideration as part of the design process that there will be an all electric kind of future?
yes, definitely.
Hi, I saw that this building is green, like platinum certified for the LEED. So what were the challenges you faced to gain this certification for LEED platinum? Were like passive design helpful to get all those points, or were there any more challenges?
Yeah, no, the Passive House vaulted us into platinum certification. It definitely did, because of the energy performance.
All right.
Who was that tenant that said they didn't want to be first?
They're happy where they are.
I've got a question. So the next building that you build, like what lessons did you learn in this building? This is so new, so different. When you're building the next generation office tower, what are you going to do differently because of this?
Well, I think empowering people and the professionals and those that are best at what they do to be creative. Give them a runway. That's what I would say. I can't tell you what I would do today, but I would say bringing the best and the brightest and let them charrette and kind of come up, brainstorm with ideas. And then, look, we always have to make dollars and cents decisions, but, you know, kind of giving people and empowering them to, you know, come up with creative solutions. Because sometimes, and that's one thing I would say, like I'm not shy about it, you know, anymore. I mean, maybe I was in my prior life, but suggesting something that may not be, you may think that it may not be welcomed in the room, and you're afraid of suggesting it because you might be shunned, but it might be welcomed. I mean, one quick story, Alexander. So we were working with someone tangentially who was looking at a high-rise project, confidential, and folks told me this person would never move forward with Passive House. I said, okay, well, an architect talked to them and said, why don't you meet with Brad? Not only did they want to move forward with Passive House, they also wanted to electrify it because the business case made sense. So, you know, I think when the business case makes sense, it's a win.
And that's the Brad effect. All right, everybody, this is our new religion. You heard it here. Let's give a big round of applause for Brad Mahoney. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We're going to have more food next time because we have such great attendance this time. Thank you. Reminder, we've got an event on the 22nd on codes, on the 10th on domestic hot water next month. And even if you don't want CEUs, make sure you sign in so that we know how many people attended. We're so excited to have you. Thank you so much. Happy 2026, and we'll see you the rest of the year.